Welcome once again to the Dr. Sky Experience, heard exclusively here on Talk Radio 77 WABC. As we like to mention and call it the crown jewel of radio, the iconic 77 Talk Radio WABC, beaming out of New York City, the nation, the world, and I'm sure out to the cosmos. Yes, you're listening to me, Steve Cates, Dr. Sky, and proudly here on this great radio station. We bring you interesting information on Solar Cycle 25 and the great solar storms that have been happening this particular week. If you're listening to this particular update, it's current as of May the 11th, 2024. The current solar wind speed is now 560 miles per second. That is the stream of particles that move out and permeate the solar system. There's a 75% chance of more X-flares on the sun, and the massive sunspot group active region 3664, which now contains 43 very active and magnetically charged sunspots, will indeed give us some great information in the form of energy from the sun, as it now transitions to the right side of the sun and soon to disappear to the backside of the sun. The sunspot number as of this particular date is 156 on the sun. But let's talk a little bit more about solar flares and what's been happening this week. We continue to update you on what happens on our star, the sun, 93 million miles away. Solar flares of sunspot cycle 25 are interesting indeed. Solar cycle 25 began on December of 2019, and it should peak, some astrophysicists and astronomers believe, by late 2024 or even early into 2025. These are geomagnetic storms, but let me qualify what we talk about here on the Dr. Sky Experience and Solar Cycle 25. Sunspots appear in the photosphere of the sun. That's the light area, the bright area that you see and need those protective solar glasses to view the sun safely. The temperature of that photosphere is about 12,000 degrees Fahrenheit, and these sunspots are actually cooler regions on the sun. Remember, the sun is not solid. It's more described as gaseous, but it's more like a plasma. But more on that in future reports. Those sunspots, these cores that are darker, are about 6,000 degrees Fahrenheit, and they're surrounded by a penumbral region, which is a little bit fainter. What's interesting about these sunspots is they're magnetically charged, and they're full of magnetic energy. So when some of these sunspots butt up against another one, their opposite polarities, plus minus or minus plus, cause what we call the phenomenon of solar flares. Now, if you can imagine this, and it's hard to even be able to talk about because it's so out of this world, the average flare intensity is as if you detonated, let's say, 100 million hydrogen bombs. That energy, of course, is pushed out into space. And in many cases, the sun pushes out other material called coronal mass ejections. These are highly charged particles, protons, that move out at a slower speed than the speed of light. A solar flare literally travels from the sun to the earth in about 8.5 minutes. That's the speed of light. But these coronal mass ejections, these particles can take upwards of 15 to 20 hours or more. But here's a little history of solar cycle 25 as far as X-flares and geomagnetic storms. Remember, geomagnetic storms go from a G1 up to a G5, which we just had this past weekend. Let's do a little history. The first geostorm of this particular cycle happened on May 12th of 2021. That was a G3 storm, not seen widely around the world, but it did interfere a little bit with high-frequency radio and communications. On July 3rd, 2021, the first of the X-flares of this solar cycle. On Halloween of 2021, another X-flare from the sun. November the 4th, 2021, our first G4 solar storm. Unfortunately, at that time, auroras were not widely visible as they were over this past weekend. Moving through our time capsule, January the 29th of 2022, a solar storm actually wiped out 38 of 49 small little satellites, like the little SpaceX satellites, because of the intense radiation. Moving on to January 2023, another solar storm. But it gets more interesting. On March the 13th, 2023, one of the fastest coronal mass ejections of this cycle were recorded. We talk about a speed of 1,200 miles per second, as opposed to the current wind speed of 560 miles per second. That hit the Earth with its energy in a little bit less than 20 hours. Moving on to March the 23rd of this particular year, as we continue to talk about these events in astronomy, that was a G4 solar storm, knocked out some power stations in the U.S., albeit on a minor scale. And then moving on to April the 21st of 2023, another G4 solar storm. Now what's going on with the latest on the sun? A brand new CME just launched off the sun today, as we're doing this recording on May the 11th. On the X scale, it was a 5.8, and that particular energy may energize the entire G numbers, meaning those geo, storm levels, all the way up to a number 5 like we had this past weekend. So in simple English, keep your eyes peeled to the northern sky in dark conditions, because you may get indeed to see something, as many people did over this previous weekend and this weekend entirely, when they saw the auroras as far south of Puerto Rico into Mexico and areas to the south like Florida and here in Arizona where I am. A fascinating story. Again, solar and sunspot active region, as we talk about it here. This particular active region, known as number 3664, with 43 very energetic sunspots, is now moving to the lower right side of the sun. So if you still have those solar glasses from last month's eclipse, make sure they don't have any holes in them, and you can actually see this sunspot on the right edge of the sun, one of the most massive sunspots of all time. But in conclusion, let's talk about the Great Carrington Event. That's an event that was widely observed by Richard Carrington and another astronomer back in September of 1859, when they observed a sunspot about as large as this group right now, and it produced one of the most massive X flares. We don't know the exact X number. And again, that particular solar storm and sunspot group was literally placed at the front and center of the sun. So we call it the kill shot. When that giant sunspot group erupts and it sends out a CME, coronal mass ejection, most damage on a very high-level numbered X flare caused what happened in 1859. What did it cause? During the internet era then, the Victorian internet, we used telegraph. And many telegraphers were actually shocked when they were keying out messages, and many of the transmission telephone-like lines, telegraph lines, literally went afire and ablaze. Now that's incredible. We live in a digital world, I need not remind you, and the problematic thing now is if we have a similar type X flare on the sun, not to be alarmist, but always speaking truth in science, this could very well knock down not only power grids, but also could destroy satellites. And right now, this is a very interesting story. Back in March of 1989, another massive X flare, a 15 on the X flare scale, it actually hit, and it hit an area in Canada near Quebec, and it knocked out power by disrupting those generators to about 30 million people. And people may wonder why. Well, the real truth of the matter is, the reason that that particular solar storm was so effective there is that the rock, or the surface rock of that part of the nation and part of the world, is very hard igneous rock. And when those solar protons and storms hit the Earth in other areas that are softer, they get absorbed for a good portion of their energy into the ground. But in this particular case, the energy bounced off the hard rock and shot itself back up to transformers and power lines, causing that great damage. To listen to me, Dr. Sky, and the Dr. Sky Experience, you can hear our updates with Frank Morano on the other side of midnight, and every other Wednesday at 1 a.m., he's kind enough to transform the name of the show to Cosmic Conversations with me, Dr. Sky, as we talk about the great realms of astronomy, space, aviation, and weather. I'm privileged and honored to be with owner and operator John Catsimatidis every Sunday morning as we take our minds off the political world and talk about the great vast unknown on the Cats Roundtable. And then more and more as these events happen, look for me, Dr. Sky, with the Dr. Sky Experience updates on Cats and Cosby on the great 5 p.m. show. If you'd like to email me, that's simple. It's drsky.show, just DRSKY show, @gmail.com. And what do we say, folks? Always remember to keep your eyes to the skies as I try to earn that opportunity. It's a privilege and honor to be here on Talk Radio 77 WABC with all the listeners, as we call it the crown jewel of radio mentioned before, the iconic 77 Talk Radio WABC, beaming ourselves out from New York City, the nation, the world, and I'm sure the cosmos. I'm Dr. Sky with the Dr. Sky Experience. I'm your navigator on the highway to the heavens, a highway that has yet no tolls, so we can expand our minds and look deep into the cosmos on things that go bump in the day and bump in the night. I'm your navigator. Thanks for joining me.